Welcome to Deep Look, Ultiworld's weekly radio show about the current state of Ultimate. I'm the host and the editor, Charlie Eisenhood. Joining me, Ultiworld senior editor Keith Rayner on this January 31st. College season in the swing, but Keith, first, my teams are playing great. Okay, the Knicks have won 8 in a row. They can't be stopped. Julius Randle is out. It doesn't matter. And the 49ers, somehow, some way, have won back-to-back games in which they played some of their worst football of the season. And yet, here we are going to the Super Bowl against the Chiefs, and everybody's going to pick the Chiefs, Keith. But I think the 49ers are going to get the job done this time around.
Is everybody going to pick the Chiefs? What's the Vegas odds at right now?
49ers minus 1.5 to 2.
Okay, so maybe cool it on trying to paint yourself as the underdogs. You're literally the Vegas favorites.
But everybody just Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Taylor Swift, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, nobody's talking about Christian McCaffrey or George Kittle. Nobody's talking about them.
I'm not hearing that talk.
Bosa. Okay.
I'm not hearing that talk.
Well, maybe, you know what? Maybe you need to get a celebrity to love your team too.
Jimmy Garoppolo still loves the 49ers, and
I'm sure there are a lot of billionaires who root for the 49ers, but nobody making them hits. You know what I'm saying? Now the Knicks got some celebrity fans.
Every time I go to the Knicks game, one of the fun things about the game is that they show you the celebs on the big screen. And I mean, legitimately every single game, there are like actual famous people there.
Of course.
And if you go to a big game, like a Friday night big game against like Boston, it's packed with celebs.
I'll give you 2 Knicks thoughts. One, a correlation doesn't imply causation, but RJ Barrett's no longer on the team and they're really good. I'm just saying. Number 2, how wild is it that the Mavs just let Jalen Brunson walk?
Wild.
This guy's so good, and he just walked right out the door.
And he's gotten better. Like, he's gotten progressively better while he's been on the Knicks. I feel like he's a top 10 guy in the league right now. It's pretty awesome. We'll see what happens. We are now up into 3rd in the East. We got to talk about this Frisbee, though. So much to get to. We've got some great college action to discuss from the weekend. Out west, we had the Santa Barbara Invite. Out east, we had the Carolina Kickoff men's tournament. And we got to look ahead to the Florida warm-up, which is coming up this weekend. So we'll get to all of that. But a few other things to note first. First of all, if you are a college player or coach, you should consider getting yourself a college team pack. They're on sale now. You can still get the early bird discount and save a little bit of extra money on what is already a great deal. You get unlimited streaming and download access of all of a college season for your entire team and coaching staff. You also get the chance to get guaranteed one of your games filmed if you go to an Ultiworld covered tournament. Other benefits as well. Submit questions to our coaching analysts. Lots of other cool products. So check that out. You can, if you go to ultiworld.com, there's a link in the upper left, says buy an early bird team pack. Click there and get yourself a team pack today. Keith, we've also got some cool stuff going on the site.
Yeah, I mean, if you get a team pack, you're going to increase your chances of winning, maybe even all of your games in perpetuity. Once
that's an unpublished benefit.
That's unpublished. I said maybe. It's not a guarantee. You know, there's an asterisk next to this. This is like a as seen on TV moment. But maybe you could get like UNC Pleiades, who hasn't lost since 2020, believe February 9th of 2020. And you can make sure, if you're wondering, have they lost recently? You can go to ultiworld.com/has Pleiades lost and find out. We said we were going to make this thing, and you know what? We put our nose to the grindstone for 10 minutes, and out popped a beautiful new webpage so that you too can track the streak for UNC. Maybe there's a mechanics page coming soon. Who knows? Maybe we'll put them on the same page.
We are coming up on 4 years of undefeated UNC Pleiades. Last time they lost was February 9th, 2020 against Carleton at QCTU. Been 1,452 days since they last lost.
Charlie, our children do not know a world where Pleiades loses. They just it's beyond their comprehension at this time.
We also have the play of the year bracket going on right now. So go watch the best plays of the year and make your votes for what you think should be number 1 of 2023. And looking forward to seeing what comes out on top. Keith, do you have a favorite?
Right now we're in the catch of the year bracket, and Claire Trope had two nasty skies get in. I think I like Claire Trope's sky over two players in the U.S. Open final. That was
that's a
pretty
classic.
filthy.
That's a
I think
classic.
that's my favorite. But we'll see how the actual bracket itself shakes out. I mean, there were some great catches this year, and we still have throws coming up after this. So we already decided block Orion Cable with the like layout sky combo block, getting the win in the last round. Some people very contentious. They really thought Valeria was going to take it home with that poach block in the national title game, but instead Orion Cable steals that one.
And then one other thing, we have to clarify something. We talked about the change in the time between, or the time not between points, but after halftime. They're changing from a 10-minute halftime to a 7-minute halftime, as we noted in the rules. However, they made a slight alteration, which is that 7 minutes doesn't include the time before the PUL goes up. So you have the 7 minutes, and then teams go to the line and they have their 85 seconds. So ultimately, it's a less dramatic change than it sounds like, because the 10 minutes used to be inclusive of that time. So it's only like a minute and change, a minute and a half or so that's being removed, but it's still going to be a shorter halftime.
Yeah, still shorter, but want to make sure that we steer everyone in the right direction as far as the rules are concerned.
Dangler Justice laid down the law on us in an email in a nice way, as he tends to do. Okay. Breaking news today. The Premier Ultimate League schedule for 2024 has been announced. Keith, we'll throw it up on the screen here. Thoughts on this year's schedule?
Well, they're taking the PUL diverts from popular traditional sports concepts in a lot of places, but they take a tried and true approach with having two of the most talked about teams playing right away. You're getting DC traveling to Raleigh. Raleigh travels to DC later in the year in week 5.
That is wrong in this graphic.
Correct.
That was given to us by the league. I assume that they will get it updated, but it is wrong. That week 5 matchup is the other way around.
Yeah, looking at the rest of the schedule, I mean, Raleigh I think has a pretty favorable schedule outside of that road game at DC. I think they have a pretty strong position coming in as the reigning champs. And then you also see, there's a couple of back-to-backs, not a lot, but there are a few throughout the schedule. So I want to make note of the teams that get opponents playing on the second end of a back-to-back.
Mm-hmm.
Those teams are New York, Philly, Milwaukee, and Nashville. Those are the teams that get teams on back-to-backs. And I guess just to highlight the teams playing on the back end of a back-to-back on the road, those are Milwaukee, Austin, Minnesota, and there's one other one. Milwaukee, Austin, Minnesota. There's one other one in here.
Portland, week 9.
Portland, okay.
At Indy, at Milwaukee.
So
no surprise. These are like the teams that are more geographically isolated.
Yeah, right. So if you're a team that obviously has to play a road back to back, but doesn't benefit from getting one coming to your place, I would say that's a schedule imbalance, a disadvantage for your team.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. I mean, especially like, Minnesota plays at Philly, at New York. Yeah. Portland plays at Indy, at Milwaukee. That doesn't feel like so terrible. Let's see. Milwaukee plays at New York, at Philly. And there was one more that now I lost it.
Austin plays at Atlanta and Nashville.
Got it.
I mean, I'd say that, like, at least somebody had the forethought to recognize that having the Philly New York pairing switch so that both one team didn't get both of the second ends of the back-to-back was very thoughtful. I'm glad somebody had the forethought. But I look at the schedule and it's a tough beat for Minnesota, who had some potential last year. Couldn't quite finish that off, but they're going to be in a situation where they have a really tough road back-to-back in week 9. And they don't benefit from getting somebody on the back-to-back. Milwaukee also has a really difficult schedule. So early on, I'm already seeing, Raleigh, DC, New York, Philly. These teams feel like they're in the best position. And you might have said that even if you didn't see a schedule.
Right. Well, let's look at Minnesota's schedule. They play home against Portland. Then they play home against Milwaukee. Then they go on the road to play Raleigh. Then they go on the road to play Philly and New York back to back. And then they're home against Indy week 10. But like, that is not great. Having to play Philly and Raleigh on the road, and New York is not going to be the same team this year. They are losing a significant chunk of last year's roster. Going to be interesting to see how competitive they end up being. But any team, having to play them on the second game of a back-to-back is not going to be an easy out. I don't care how much more talented you are than them. And it may not be that Minnesota is like significantly better than New York. So that's really tough stuff. You almost like, do you even, you obviously try to win every game, but there's some of those in the schedule, like at Raleigh, it's like, oof, are you really going to be able to send a full team and get the win there? But, that is how it is. Like, Minnesota's far from everybody except Milwaukee. So you kind of got to expect that you're going to have to play some tough road games.
And we know in the history of Semi-Pro Ultimate that being able to travel well is a real challenge, and it has really harmed some teams, not being able to field full rosters when you're traveling. So we'll see how these teams perform on the road, because that could be a defining factor. And the season's so short. I mean, you're talking from April 6th is the Open, and June 9th is the end of week 10. They have 2 bye weeks during the season, week 6 and week 11. But it's not, you don't have a ton of games. So you're not playing every week between those. You have 6 games on your schedule. So every game's going to matter. Those road games can make a big difference. I don't think we don't know yet, I think, exactly how they're going to decide postseason participation, and whether it really may come down to, it could be point by point to decide who's going to make it, depending on what methodology they opt to go with this year. But we know that we're going to see rosters probably in about a month's time. Tryouts should wrap up early February, and then we should start getting roster announcements coming out not too long after that.
I'm hearing Milwaukee is going to play in Madison during College Nationals, May 25th, 26th weekend. So going to try to pick up some local crowd. A lot of people, of course, in town for the tournament. Should be cool to see.
Yeah, Atlanta on the road in that one.
Overall, it's kind of hard to make a lot of prognostications until we see rosters at the end of the day. I mean, we can look at the schedule here and think about, how we expect teams to shape up. I think it's fair to say DC and Raleigh should be really strong. I love that they're kicking their season off with DC at Raleigh. That is, we saw the Western Ultimate League do that last year, put kind of that marquee matchup in the very first game of the year. Great way to get people focusing again on the league. So I think that game is going to tell us a lot right off the bat. April 6th and 7th. We're just about 2 months away from that. So looking forward to seeing the rosters when we get them. Right now, we are going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to be talking with Jake Thorne, who is an Ultiworld reporter on the ground at the Santa Barbara Invite, the kind of kickoff college tournament on the West Coast. And we saw some very interesting results out there. Cal Poly SLO dominating in the men's division. They come away with an undefeated weekend. And UBC on the women's division, my preseason pick to win the championship. By the way, Keith, they get the job done on the women's side, taking out some top teams like Stanford and Carleton on their way. And so we will talk to Jake about those teams and more from the Santa Barbara Invite. Stay with us. Joining us now on Deep Look is Oakland-based Ultiworld reporter Jake Thorne, who was down at the Santa Barbara Invite this weekend. Always a great tournament. This is the first year in almost a decade that I haven't gone to this tournament. I missed it. Jake, how was it?
Oh, it was an awesome tournament, Charlie. A little bit of a hectic weekend. I'm not sure if everybody knows. The rounds went from 8 a.m. to 10:30 on the first day. So put a lot of pressure on the teams that then had to wake up at 8 a.m. Put a lot of pressure on the reporters that had to get an article out that night. But it was still a really awesome event.
Well, thanks for being here. A super interesting start to the season. And I want to start with your alma mater, Cal Poly SLO. They come out and take care of business in the men's division. I mean, they rolled teams in the bracket to win this tournament. Obviously, they made a semifinals run at nationals last year. How are they looking, overall to begin this season, especially as they kind of bring back a lot of the team that took them to semis last year?
Yeah, I think my main takeaway is their ceiling looks even higher than last year. And I'll try and control myself. I could gush about this team for 15 minutes. But I guess starting off, just looking at their offense, they've got, 6 elite club players from, Revolver, Mixtape, Condors, if you count them as elite clubs still. And it's just if you're another team in the top 8 matching up against them, there's very few teams, even in that top tier, that can really, stand a chance guarding them in a person type situation. But it's not just their stars too. Even the guys that were I when I was a senior that we took as a freshman that were maybe a flyer, maybe it was okay, I'm not sure if they're going to pan out. Those players are developing super well. The coaching looks great. The culture and the sideline cheers looks great. So everyone looks dialed in, and nobody even really came close of giving them a game the entire weekend.
Now, Calvin Brown playing on the offense this year to start the season. How did that look? I mean, of course, we got used to him kind of leading the D line a year ago, but now back on offense in what seems like a more natural role for him.
Yeah, he looked incredible all weekend. He looked like the best player on the field most games. I think people know Calvin for someone who can, just throw these, incredible, deep shots, and he was doing that, for sure. But I think maybe with his experience on Revolver this past season as an offensive handler there, as well as on the Beach Worlds team, I think he's showed a lot of growth in staying measured and maturity in his shot selection. So now that he has so many killers on his offense, he doesn't really have to force that much. And he's still going to throw his, Calvin, what are you doing type of throws that end up working out. But, that's who he is. But, he's not just that. He's also, a world-class break thrower. He's also an amazing defender as well. They would cross him over to D, and he would take a tough matchup, and he was getting blocks all over the field too. So he's not just, a one-dimensional player. He's a great athlete, great thrower, and also, very intelligent as well.
They opened with the 14-9 win over BYU. They've struggled in that BYU game in the past, but I think that set a tone for a great weekend. And then somehow it gets better. That's the worst score that they had all weekend. They paced Oregon 15-8 in the final. What was it like in the final? How did they end up with such a strong result against a team as good as Oregon?
Yeah, so I think this is a good time to talk about a little bit about Oregon too. Oregon looks solid all weekend. They're athletic, they're deep. I guess I do have questions about their top end a little bit when competing with a team of the quality of SLO. I get Micah Glass wasn't there. He's going to buoy them, a pretty fair bit going forward when he returns to the field. But I mean, if we're looking at their top 5 compared to SLO's top 5, just to list some names out on Oregon, Ben Horsberger, Gabe Nobis, I think Raekwon Atkins, who's a freshman, will get there by the end of the season. Beckett Sesmis, who's, a big cutter. If we're comparing those to Calvin Brown, Kyle Liu, Alex Nelson, Anton Norm, Seamus Robinson, there's really not much comparison there. And I also think later on down the stretch of the game, Cal Poly just kind of put flexes in the lane and the Oregon handlers couldn't deal with it. So I think that's going to be an issue for an Oregon maybe going forward that they have to resolve, is if a team throws a look at them that they're not comfortable with, they have to be able to adapt in game to adjust and get back in the saddle in the game.
Well, we'll get back to the men's side in a second, but I want to switch gears and talk about the winner on the women's side, and that is UBC. They typically do not attend Santa Barbara Invite. They usually start their season at Stanford in early March. And I think it goes to show you how serious they are about their chances this year. And Jake, I mean, all weekend you were gushing about this team. They don't win by the same margins as SLO, but on the other hand, I think the caliber of competition on the women's side from a top 10 perspective, quite a bit stronger than on the men's side. How did UBC look coming out early in the season? Is this a team that is going to improve on last year's semifinal big loss that they took to Colorado?
Yeah, so day one, the first few games I'm watching UBC, and the immediate thoughts I have is oh my God, do they have more talent than UNC? I was comparing the rosters back to back, and I was there's definitely an argument to say that UBC is more talented than UNC, and also the deepest talent pool in the entire division. But if you look at who they played at day one, they played Cal, Utah, UCSD. Those teams probably aren't going to be competing, maybe competing to go to nationals, but they're probably likely not going to make nationals. So when they started to go up against competition that was actually on the stronger side, like Carleton, Carleton was up big on them day two. They showed a lot of heart getting back into that game, but we'll see if they can. I guess I would say is like after day two, I felt a little bit less confident in my take that UBC was going to take down Pleiades. But yeah, they're still an incredible team, and they didn't even have their best player, Mika Kurahashi. I think like some of the players that impressed me, of course, Anna Gadu, Madison Ong. I mean, they've been stars for a while, but also some of their younger players too, like Brielle Wong, Megan Chow, Jenilyn Ng. Those were players that really stepped up and show a lot of promise for when Madison and Anna graduate at the end of the season as well.
I thought Anna Gadu looked awesome when I was watching their games. I think she's got an All-American campaign in her potentially this year. But you mentioned they do beat Oregon in the final 15-12, but really it feels like their toughest test came in that semifinal game against Carleton. What did they do to turn that game around?
Yeah, so they just came out of half firing and got rattled off 4 breaks. I'm not sure what was said in the huddle. Carleton is not an easy team to beat. I think similar to Cal Poly on the men's division, their top 5 is so strong. So yeah, UBC kind of just turning it on, and I'm not sure if I have a better answer than that. Maybe they adjusted some things strategy wise, but I would have to go back and watch that game to be sure.
So let's stay on the women's side. A lot of questions about some of the other top teams and kind of where they are in the pecking order. So whether you want to talk about Carleton, of course, you've got Stanford, Oregon. Where do you kind of relatively rank those top tier teams after what you saw this weekend?
That's a great question. I think I'd probably put Oregon at the top of the Carleton Stanford tier. They have what I think is a top 10 player in Way Bright. They've got Zoe Luke, who had an all tournament type tournament. Who else is on this team? Thais Thomas, Eliana Norton, and then some really strong freshmen too, like Mara Glasinovich, Anna Carlson. They were both at the WJUC tryouts on the West Coast. They impressed me. They had a great debut for the college season. So yeah, I think Oregon's really strong, and then Carleton as well. Tori Gray is going to be probably a top 7 player in the country this year. Mia Biebenweber is a unicorn type build. Super athletic and throws. Kind of reminds me of Ella Hansen a little bit. But I'm not sure if she plays disc golf. Maybe she should pick up the disc craft. And then Arya Krishner as well. Absurdly strong in pretty much every realm of the game. So they've got a pretty small roster, but if they can stay healthy, then they're going to be definitely a force to be reckoned with, and I could see them making semis for sure. And then also the last player from Carleton that impressed me a lot, Naomi Fina. I'm telling y'all, she's a sophomore out of Seattle, looked like the fastest player on the field and a huge playmaker too. So I think she'll be a pretty important piece for them going forward this season.
I'll just follow up and say, talk about Stanford. A lot of buzz.
Yeah. So Stanford. Yeah, a lot of buzz, and I think it's well deserved. They might have not got the results that they wanted, losing to BYU, losing to Carleton in the consolation game for third. But they didn't have apparently, according to rumors at the tournament, they 5 of their 7 best players. Not sure if that's a little bit melodramatic from the rumors, but yeah, Stanford looks excellent. Macy Volbrecht and Esther Philippek, awesome players. Their freshmen look good too. Harper Bear, I think, is a freshman. Dora McCotter Hewlett also looked very good. So they've got the coaching assets as well. So I think this is another team that can really push for another semis appearance and potentially going further than that as well.
Were there any other teams that maybe didn't quite have the same level of results that overall stood out to you in some way that you feel showed that they have a really high ceiling?
Yeah, I know UCSB went out in pre-quarters to Santa Cruz, which we can talk about after this, but I really like UCSB's build. They're athletic. They've got, center hub handler and Julia Hasbrook who can make it happen. Devin Quinn is one of the best athletes downfield. And then Laura Bloom is really coming on as like a dynamic playmaker on both sides of the disc after her season with Flipside. So tough result for them on the weekend, but I think I would predict them to be, a top 8 team going forward in the country, I think. And then Santa Cruz kind of out of nowhere, getting this upset over UCSB. It kind of adds an interesting wrinkle to the Southwest division this year and the greater college division as well. I think the story of that is just like Rachel Chang is probably already like a top 15 player in the country as a freshman. And it was pretty clear against their game against UCSB that they were just the best player on the field. And that goes a long way.
That's amazing. I mean, we the hype has been there already, but for them to make an impact this early, very impressive. But they did lose to Washington in quarters, 14-8. Or I guess that was in a consolation game. But Washington, pretty good weekend overall. They go 5-2. They only lose to Carleton and Oregon. Not super close in those games. But there's always question marks about this Washington team. We know how much talent is in the Seattle area, and they get a really nice pipeline. They don't look like they're quite on that semifinals tier, but do they have the pieces, you think, to improve over the course of the season and maybe get there?
I wouldn't say I'm bullish on them making semis this year. They're young, so maybe in the future, I think they've got a good shot of making quarters. But when they went up against those semis quality teams, they didn't really stand a chance.
Fair. Let's go back over to the men's division then. We talked about SLO and Oregon. Who else stood out to you from the men's side of the field?
Okay, SLO, Oregon. Let's talk about Cal. So Cal brings back most of their players from last year. They bring back Dexter and Gavin, which are their 2 biggest pieces, and I expected them to fully beat Oregon in that semifinal game. I think there's 2 reasons that they didn't. Well, I think there's and that kind of goes back to kind of like the formula for beating Cal. So you need 2 things in addition to some other factors as well. The first, you need a handler game plan that will be able to dispatch a number of different zone looks. You don't have that, you're done for. And then the second is having matchups for Dexter and Gavin. And Oregon have about as good as you can do in the college division in Kaylee McCarter, Raekwon Atkins, and Ben Horsberger on those 3 guys. Gavin was absolutely embarrassing people this entire weekend. In the filmed game against Utah, he caught like 4 deep goals of just like trash balls where he would just like body the guy and just come down with it and then do some, annoying celebration to like taunt the defender. So Gavin is probably one of the most annoying players to play against in the entire Southwest because you know what's coming and you can't do anything to stop it.
He is a like old man at the gym basketball kind of game. Like it's not like he's going up and just posterizing everybody, but just like holds his position really well. Incredible reads on the disc, and it's like must be super annoying to play against. I totally get it from watching the film. What about UCLA? I mean, it seemed like it was a good weekend for the Southwest Big 3.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of known in the Southwest as a little bit of like a UCLA hater, whether that's deserved or not. It can be left up to the people, but I think they had a solid weekend. I think their Big 3 is excellent. RKD, Matt Barcelos had an awesome tournament. Marshall Wildman had an awesome tournament. He's playing D-line with Brandon Van Dusen gone. But I just don't know if their depth is really they can do it. Like the Hirshhorn twins are good. They got a couple of freshmen that are interesting. I think Emmett Brusowski's his name. He hurt his elbow, so he wasn't playing day 2. So maybe that makes a difference. But also Loic Balout, which is a U20 kid who is a sophomore now. He's starting to come on and get more comfortable in the college division. He had a really great tournament. But yeah, I don't really see them pushing SLO. And I think Cal definitely has an edge on them so far. And I don't think they're safe as the 3rd out of the Southwest because I think UCSD always gives them a really great game. And UCLA hasn't shown that they can perform at that regionals, high pressure stage game to go. So I think they're really hoping that a 4th bid comes to the Southwest. Not sure if it's realistic this year. They're going to have to keep building to build their assurance that they'll make it this year, the Nationals.
BYU, not quite the team we've seen in the past couple of seasons. I think there was an expectation that they were going to drop off a little bit last year, and then they looked amazing most of last season. Now, obviously, they're not really in the Nationals conversation, but What did you see from BYU this weekend? They finally lose to Cal Poly SLO.
Yeah, how dare they? How dare they like get worse as Cal Poly was getting better when, maybe even like a good BYU team, I think a good like SLO could maybe even beat a good BYU team this year, but as they've fallen off a little bit, that game wasn't really close. And it kind of begs the question, will BYU earn a bid for the Northwest? They're about to go to Florida warm-up. They've got a tough schedule. If they get beat up by those teams there, who knows? They'll probably earn a bid, but it's kind of an interesting question to see how how far they've fallen. This is like similar, like they don't really have the top end to compete with, the teams like Cal Poly. They lost to UW on Universe, and UW is only returning like a third of their team from last year. They've still got some good pieces here and there, but I think we're starting to see like Bryce Merrill's influence and impact starting to like kind of phase out. And it's interesting, like, are these kids on their, on their mission trips that have committed to Utah? Are they going to enter the transfer portal to go to a team like Utah or Utah State that, is showing some more promise as a team and as programs going forward? Potentially, but I don't think BYU necessarily has it this year. Maybe they'll turn it on and they'll surprise me at Florida warm-up, though.
What's your impression of these Northwest teams down the line? I mean, which one do you think really stood out after you get past Oregon and not counting for BYU? When you look at UBC, Utah, Washington, UVic, I mean, there was some buzz around each of these teams, and I think we'll probably end up having some of the same conversations later in the year. You throw in Utah State, Oregon State, there's a whole mess of them. But is anybody standing out to you based on what you saw at SBI?
Honestly, no, Keith. I think it's a pretty flat tier for all those teams below Oregon. I can do just very quick hits on all of those. UBC, I think, takes a little bit of a step back this year. They lose Avir Lamba. They lose Yuchi Lin. Justin Podnar is great. Devin Bridlenge Powell is great. I don't think they necessarily have the throwing power to get it done this season to make nationals. I'm not sure they're going to make it this year. UVic loses Justin Pettinuzzo and Ricky McLeod, but they put up a solid tournament. So I also don't think they're on that nationals level, but they could be interesting. Utah, on the other hand, I think they disappointed me a little bit just because I was so high on their Will Selfridge, Oscar Brown, and Grayson Retberg young trio. I think they're going to be very interesting in the future as a potential even like nationals quarterfinal, maybe even semifinal if they can continue to recruit well in the coming years. But I don't think they're ready to win now quite yet. I think I would be surprised if they didn't make nationals with the talent they have in the Northwest. But who really knows? Because all those teams in the Northwest are pretty even in terms of their strength. UW has Jack Brown, really awesome player. Martin Lee, great. David Zhao, great. And they pick up this freshman Carter Bear, who's like 6'5", like really athletic cutter. He's playing for Canada U20. He's going to be a really awesome contributor for them. But I don't think they're safe in the Northwest either. So it's going to be very interesting going down the stretch, assessing those teams for sure.
Well, overall, a good weekend for the Southwest. When you think about it from a bid perspective, you've got Southwest teams in 3 of the 4 spots at the top of the tournament, with Oregon, the lone Northwest representative. So that could play a role. I mean, Utah has a decent win-loss record. They go 5-3. 2 of those losses, though, coming to Cal and UCLA. Those are rankings points drifting south. Overall, I would love to get your thoughts on where you think kind of the bid picture is. Obviously, it's very early. Just impact from both the men's and the women's side.
Yeah. So starting in men's, I think the Southwest can pretty safely say they'll have 3 bids for now. UCLA, I think, is a little bit of a question mark because they travel more outside of California to tournaments, and they've done well in the past. But we'll see if that trend continues this year. It seems like they are very soft to injuries this year. If one of their big 3 gets hurt, it's really going to hurt the team. As far as the Northwest goes, it's nice to have that BYU bid in their pocket, but I think there's 7 or 8 teams that have a claim at potentially pushing for nationals on the men's side. So like I said, it's just going to be a bloody Northwest again, and it's pretty whoever is best on Sunday of regionals will probably get those spots. As far as the women's division goes, let's see. In the finals, it was pretty even between the coasts, right? or between the Northwest and the Southwest. And then Carleton as well. I'm not as sure for the women's because they get more traveling teams coming in. But I think the Southwest teams maybe aren't as strong as in years past, and the Northwest teams are starting to build up strength.
The return of the evil empire. I think there's a chance that that's what we're looking at. I mean, you look at UC San Diego struggling a bit, and you look at UVic nearly knocks off Stanford, right? If Stanford could be the best team in the Southwest, and UVic's like caught on their tail, and they may be the third or fourth best team in the Northwest. So I think we could be looking at a big evil empire year, and other regions may be giving up their extra bid to the Northwest, a return to the days of old.
Yeah, I like UVic. I didn't mention UVic, but I mean, they don't really have like a standout star player, if you will. Maybe if I watched them a little bit closer, I would start to, get those names that I could share. But yeah, they just play team ball. They play for each other, and I think they're very interesting this year as a potential Natty's attendee.
All right. Who do you think at this tournament, this is my last question, has realistic championship potential this season?
Okay, on the women's side, I think UBC, really does have a chance this year. I think what's going to hold them back is they don't, on the defensive side of the ball, like who's going to guard Dawn Colton? I'm not sure if they have a matchup for someone as athletic as Dawn, but we'll see. I think maybe you could cross Anna over, but then, you want her on offense, so it's tricky. I think Stanford has a chance. We haven't seen them full strength yet. And even without, 5 of 7 of their best players, they put up a really solid tournament. And then Oregon, contender for sure. Top 10 player on their team with a lot of depth surrounding them. And then Carleton as well, 5 elite players, and then, like 11 or 12 just solid players with a lot of them who have YCC experience. A little bit more bearish on them because their roster is so small, and going down, like tournaments are just going to be brutal for them. And if injuries start to pile up, it could really start to kind of spiral for them. On the men's side, I think the only team that will contend here was Cal Poly.
Sounds about right. But it's going to be really interesting to see. Of course, we'll get more looks at UNC against top caliber competition a little bit later this season. They took care of business at Kickoff. Jake, thank you so much. Appreciate you coming on and for all the great reporting.
Thank you, Charlie and Keith.
Jake Thorne with us here on Deep Look. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Deep Look. Thanks again to Jake for coming on and breaking things down for us. I'm excited for all these West Coast teams this year, Keith.
For sure. I mean, it's going to be a really competitive season. The Northwest men's and Southwest, Northwest men's, Northwest women's also looking strong. What do we get out of the rest of the Southwest women's? We're seeing this Santa Cruz team come on, and we're seeing UCSD have some struggles. So I don't know exactly what to expect, but a good first salvo. I definitely think there's interesting results even down the line when you look at both of the Utah teams in both divisions. How did they perform? What's their ceiling look like? There's a lot to look at, I think, across this tournament, and that just means we're getting into the throes of college season fast. It feels like.
Well, how do you feel about Stanford on the women's side after, they're missing some starters, but they also had some of their best players playing. They had like good results, if not kind of maybe to the expectations that we had for them coming into the tournament. Is this just like a hold and wait and see, or do you downgrade them a little bit in your mind? How do you feel?
I think I'm downgrading them a little bit. I think that you would like to see them, given that they have so much experience on this team. I think you'd like to see them taking a step forward, and this felt like maybe a slight stumble because even yes, they played well against Oregon, but you lose by 4 to Carleton. They really could have lost that game against UVic. Even though they were up pretty big, they let UVic get back into it. They lose to BYU. They don't exactly look like Sterling against Santa Cruz in their opener. I mean, it's a little concerning. I have so much faith in their coaching though that it's hard to like really worry about where they're going to be come May. But it doesn't give me confidence that they are like ready to step up. You know, we were talking about, should they be in the same tier as the top four, as that Big Four semifinals teams? Like, do they have the same kind of semifinal shot? And right now, I think if you're horse racing them with the likes of Carleton or Oregon, I don't know why you would feel better about Stanford than those teams.
I think I'm going to leave it more as an incomplete. I don't really feel like I can judge a team if they're missing 5 starters. And it's not like they like lost bad games they shouldn't have lost. They lost to good teams. So let's see what happens when they have their full bench. And for them to be at this point this early, I think is also a good sign. You know, they weren't this good last year at this time. I think we had lower expectations for them a year ago than we do today. Probably wrongly so, but we'll see. I still think that they, because of the coaching edge that I think they have over most teams, they for me are like still very much championship contender level. Even if their talent level isn't as high as other teams, because it wasn't last year either, and they still way outperformed expectations.
Well, see, that's the thing, is I feel like their talent level is in line with a lot of the top level teams, and that's
Fair
why
enough.
I have higher expectations. I think they have the talent and the coaching in the system now.
I agree.
So, like I really think that they on paper they have that title contention quality, and I would like to see them do a little bit more than what they were this weekend. But you know, obviously it's January. I'm not going to final verdict anybody at this point. You know, we're just in the opening statements.
Over on the East Coast, the Carolina Kickoff men's division played out this weekend. Much like on the women's side, the UNC team dominated. Darkside wins 15-10 over NC State in the final. Those were the top 2 seeds. South Carolina makes it to the semis, backing up a little bit of preseason hype. And UNC Charlotte also makes it to semis. They lose 15-9 to NC State. South Carolina loses 15-8 to UNC. Keith, thoughts on what we saw, kind of like an early AC preview?
Breaking news: UNC looks really good. They, in the final against NC State, they actually were getting a pretty good test. I think it was like 5-5. Their offense was missing on a couple of hits, but from there, you just saw a team that was better set up to execute. They kind of cruised away from NC State there. You're looking a little bit at North Carolina's personnel, where everybody's going to go. They had Kevin Pignoni playing on offense. This is a guy who was considered one of the best, most valuable defensive players in the division last year, and now they've pushed him over to offense. Seth Freed, who I think will probably figure into the Rookie of the Year conversation with both this combination of talent and role in such a high level team. He's already getting O-line reps too. So I think that they're already starting to take shape, and that's one of the advantages of being at UNC is you can be really ahead of schedule, or your schedule's just ahead of everybody else. But NC State looked pretty solid. I actually thought the field was pretty balanced from there on out. You look at NC State, UNC Charlotte, South Carolina, you mentioned Penn State, and then there were some less consistency from the likes of Duke and UNC Wilmington, but you also saw that they had the ability to compete with those other teams I just mentioned. UNC Charlotte, this is the 3rd year in a row that there's been like a little bit of buzz about this team. The first year was like disrespect for them. They were like, hey, we're better than people realize. And then last year there was a little bit of, last year they were better than we thought they'd be. So maybe they'll come through that last year. We know how last year went. And then this year, I think there's a little bit of expectation with the return of Ben Simmons, who, shout out to whoever the person is on Twitter who replies to almost literally every Ultiworld post with how will this affect Ben Simmons' legacy? Like the dedication, I can't knock it. I can't knock that. But UNC Charlotte, I think, has some potential. I was impressed with some of their other players. Jarrell Bushell was somebody who stood out to me. I think a 2nd-year player for them. So I think that there's something brewing. Do you worry that the AC could, as it has many times before, produce a bunch of teams who could cannibalize each other's chances when it comes down to it? Sure, you sure do. But I think that they have teams good enough to really battle NC State for that 2nd bid, or potentially earn a 3rd.
I think that's really the question. Who's bid earning out of this region? It's hard to say right now, but it doesn't help that, let's say, UNC Charlotte loses to Duke, and Duke lost to Chop. Well, shout out to the D3 team out of Carleton for getting that win. They had a nice weekend overall. They go 4-2. They lose big to UNC Charlotte. And then they lose by 5 to Georgetown. But they get a win over Duke. They beat Davidson, another D3 team, 15-8, blew them out. They also get wins over Lehigh and Tennessee. So a nice weekend for them. But, if you have all these kind of mishmashy results, what ends up happening is the whole cohort tends to float down. And so can one of these teams separate enough to get another bid? Because if not, I think it's going to be straightforward UNC. And if NC State earns a bid, which I expect that they will, then they'll take the second bid. Because I just don't, for all you just said about UNC Charlotte, and I agree, they still lost handily to NC State. Are they going to make up a 6-goal deficit by regionals? I doubt it. There's just
shout out to D3 men's though. We kind of we skipped past it, but OC had a nice weekend out at Santa Barbara Invite too. They went to Universe with UBC men's. They probably should have won it. They lost a close game to Utah. They beat UCSD. They were competitive with the Santa Cruz team that yes is taking a step back, but was at nationals last year. Yeah, get your D3 hype ready in the men's division for OC.
They will be very refocused after blowing it last year and not making nationals. They will still be they are a championship contending team, 100%.
I usually don't delve into this stuff a little bit, but I did hear some rather concerning thoughts about some of the spirit of the team, some kind of inappropriate language being used. So hopefully they clean some of that stuff up because the Ultimate is good. They're playing good Ultimate. They have a really interesting team to watch.
Wash out your Oklahoma Christian mouth, kids. I didn't hear that. Interesting. Penn State got some hype going at kickoff. They lose by 2 to NC State, and they put up the closest result of any team against UNC. They lose by 3, 15-12. Otherwise, they kind of get easy wins over Georgetown, Duke, Wilmington, and Davidson. Is this the year, Keith? I mean, this is the start of a resume that could earn a bid. And I do think that will be important. I have a hard time seeing them getting past Pitt in a 1-bid region, but could they earn a second bid? This is the start. You play really close against a team that's probably going to be number 1 or number 2 by the end of the year. And you are even closer to a team that's probably going to be top 12 in NC State.
Yeah, sophomore Ethan Pigeon kind of driving the bus for this Penn State team that's had some good recruits over the past couple of years. They've had a little bit of buzz for a couple of years, but haven't really delivered on that yet. This is, you're right, a great start. Actually looking at their resume on paper, you might even say that they were the third best team at this tournament. Maybe even the second best. I mean, they are, I guess you can't really, they lost NC State heads up. So yeah, you might have an argument that they're the third best team in this tournament. They do walk away with good results. In pocket. They'll have to be clicking at a high level for the rest of the year though to finish off and actually take home a bid.
It is worth noting. I know it's the fall, but it is worth noting that they beat Pitt at Steel City Showdown in November. They did do that. But obviously a full strength Pitt is still going to be the heavy favorite in the Ohio Valley. We will see Penn State again very soon. They're playing at Queen City. So a chance to see if they can keep it going. A lot of buzz last year. They were kind of chirpy too, and then it never materialized. But I think this to me looks like the resume of a team that is for real and could go to nationals.
We'll see Pitt even sooner, Charlie. Even sooner than Queen City 2 now.
That's because they are going to be coming up at Florida warm-up, which is this weekend. Keith, we didn't make picks last week. I don't really know what's wrong with us.
I don't know about you, but I was going to pick UBC in the women's division and Cal Poly SLO in the men's division. I mean, obviously.
Well, you're making jokes.
We should just give ourselves the points.
But I told you before the show that that's what I would have done, and I would have actually done it, unlike you who was lying.
Yes, there's written evidence that I would have picked the Stanford women's team. So Superfly didn't come through for me, but I think I would have picked SLO too.
I mean, I think SLO is an easy pick, right? I mean, given the roster continuity, but they outperformed my expectations. Winning was what I expected, but I didn't expect them to win so comfortably over these teams. They dominated.
They looked apart. I mean, this is what you want to see if you're thinking this is a team that can make semifinals and challenge for a title. Warm
up is coming up. We've got our streaming schedule for you. We'll throw it up on the YouTube. Keith, a lot of great games. You never really know. This is my favorite college tournament of the season because You have these preset matchups. And if, worse teams tend to play weaker schedules, better teams tend to play better schedules. So there's this nice NFL style balance. And it means that one or two of the teams that are not quite as good end up going to quarters, because the first thing that counts is that your win-loss record has to be good enough to get you in. And then it comes down to the algorithm after that. So, the quarters teams, you really don't have a sense before the tournament of like where things stand, and you can scour the schedule and try to figure things out. But lots of great teams in attendance yet again, as is always the case at this tournament. Let's start with this. What's your favorite matchup that will be streaming on the first 2 days?
Ooh, favorite streaming matchup. Well, I think that kind of the obvious choice is BYU UMass. I think that's where a lot of people are going to gravitate.
I feel like UMass is going to roll.
I mean, now people might think that you might feel that way, but hey, this is our chance of connectivity. What if they play a really tight game? Are you suddenly like, is SLO better than UMass? I don't know.
It wouldn't be that crazy.
I think for me, it's Pitt Vermont. That's probably the game I want to see. I'm very curious to see where Vermont's at, given their losses from last year. How will Pitt bounce back from last season as well? So I'm very curious about how those two teams will handle each other. That's the matchup that I'm most interested in.
Yeah, where's Vermont at? I think a lot of us have been kind of expecting them to take a bit of a step back as they lose some key contributors from last year, but they still have a lot of really good players on their roster, and the scene is very healthy. So they might not take as much of a step back as you might expect. That will certainly be a tester game for both teams. Pitt bringing pretty much everybody back. But, I don't think they quite met the level of expectations that we had for them a year ago. And so I obviously expect still a heavy dose of Henry Ing. I will not be surprised at all if Pittsburgh wins this tournament again. But, where do they fit in? So many question marks about teams at this tournament. I'm not worried about UMass. They're probably the favorites on paper to win. I'm very interested in where Cut is. They get some nice recruits. They made I think some nice steps forward last year as a team. How good is Brown? Another team that I think could certainly win this tournament. And then there's like a lot of regional tier teams that I'm curious about. So this is just a great tournament every year.
I am bullish on Cut. I'm not just for this tournament. I'm like, the more I look at Cut and their roster, the more I'm interested in this team's long-term potential this season. I think that they could be a bit of a breakout, a team that could come from, outside of that top 6 or 7 and be a team that by the time we get around to nationals, we're thinking about being a semifinals team. I think that's within their range of possibilities. But yeah, I think after that, like, it is those teams that are right around the line, that maybe are nationals level, maybe are not, maybe you're going to be fighting for a bid. Those are teams I'm intrigued to see. I want to see what Northeastern has to offer against Georgia. I want to see what Wash U can do against Cut. Tufts, Cincinnati. There's been some Cincinnati buzz. They picked up Will Wettengill, who's one of our top ranked rookies. Can he help push Cincinnati into relevance? We've heard a little bit of Cincinnati buzz in the past, so it's not totally out of nowhere. But what will they have to offer? You got Mark Hankey at Texas A&M. Like there are definitely some things to keep an eye on, even in these matchups that are a little less marquee.
Will Wettengill was one of the best high school players last season, and like an actual impact maker in the AUDL. And for whatever reason, maybe because he's mostly a D guy, he's not getting talked about in the same way that we're talking about Tobias Brooks or Will Selfridge. But I think, he is physically the most gifted of those players just named. I don't know how tall he is. He's probably 6'2", maybe 6'3". He's tall. And I think he could plug right in and be like a huge impact player on like that regional tier team where he's like the dude. How that plays into the rookie of the year conversation, we'll have to find out. But, some of these other guys, Selfridge in a similar spot in terms of his team at Utah, but Tobias Brooks is going into Colorado, where obviously there's kind of more of a established group of star players. I think he's the most talented of this rookie class, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to win Rookie of the Year. We have seen that the most hyped recruit doesn't win Rookie of the Year every time. Didn't JR beat out Liam Searles-Bose for Rookie of the Year?
Yes.
There you go.
Believe so.
Although it's not clear to me who the better player is going to be long run. They both could define the era.
Even beyond that, I mean, there are a couple teams that we don't have on stream yet that we'll hope to get. But there's a little bit of latent Alabama Huntsville buzz. I mean, this is a team that I believe was D3 not too long ago. And they have a couple of players who've got some elite club experience in the mixed division. They've got some good pickups. They picked up Kenny Taylor, who's been with Chain and the Hustle. So this is exactly a great opportunity for them to break out. All it takes is one upset win or taking someone to Universe, making quarters. Like, these are the kinds of things that could lead to this team getting talked about. Georgia Tech is another team that we maybe we'll get them in the quarterfinal round if they have a big weekend. But you always see somebody from these lower level teams that don't have the same strength of schedule, but it busts their way in. And usually it's on the back of big wins over some of the other teams and then a strong result against one other top level team. That's how you announce yourself really at this tournament, I think.
Well, you think about that Alabama Huntsville team, you take a look at their lineup of games: Wisconsin, Tufts, Cornell, Florida, BYU. It's not easy, but they've also got winnable games on that. And if they're for real, they're going to beat Cornell. They're going to beat Florida. They should probably beat Tufts if they're seriously for real. And you're playing Wisconsin in their first tournament of the year and their first game of the season. It's a winnable matchup. We see typically Wisconsin tends to be a little slow out of the gate to start their year because of, well, the weather conditions in Wisconsin. So fun to see. Also, I think they get BYU last. Will they be tired? BYU never seems to get tired, but
no.
You always ask about it at this tournament because they play 8 straight. Okay.
And on back-to-back weekends, right?
Right. Crazy. Keith, we got to make our picks.
What are we picking here? Semis and finals and the champion, or just
finals?
champion?
I think just finals and the champion.
Okay.
If you want to pick semis, we could, but I think just finals and the champion for scoring purposes.
Yeah, give me. I'll take the favorite. I'll take UMass to make the final, and then I'm picking between. Man, this is tough. I think I'm going to take Georgia. I want to take Carleton. I really do.
Wow.
I'm going to take Georgia, and I'm going to take UMass over Georgia in the final.
Interesting. I'm going completely opposite direction. I'm going to take Brown over Pitt.
I love that we're in just different areas altogether.
Georgia to the final. I love it. What gives you so much belief in Georgia this season?
They're returning like their best players, right? They're bringing back
so are all of these
Downey,
teams.
Yeah, Adam Miller, Jake Powell, Cole Chandler. Like they have all their guys back basically. They're deep. They're going to be comfortable here. I think that they've got the goods. I think that we've seen them play well at this tournament in years past too. So yeah, I think Pitt and Brown are both perfectly reasonable choices. I have no druthers with that, but I'm going to take Georgia.
I want to see if I need to see this Georgia team play with more consistency. It's that simple. We saw at last year's warm up. We saw the capacity. They have the players and the talent to be a great team, and they were deeply inconsistent offensively. So I think they have the horses. I need to see it come together, and certainly they could make a real statement if they do in fact make the final this weekend. They get Northeastern, BYU, Central Florida, Carleton, and Cincinnati. So they should definitely make the bracket. Gonna be a lot of fun.
First picks of the year. We had to figure out what we're going to do for the listener picks. We'll come up with how we're going to play it out.
Subscribers going to make picks in the Discord, and
Okay.
then we'll
That's what I
figure
thought.
out what the stakes are.
All right, so subscribers, those Discord picks will be up soon, and if you want to make picks, you can get access to our Discord with a subscription. So
Before we go, we have our question of the week. Keith, what is it?
So this question is thoughts on high school, YCC, or other non-college teams taking the spot of college teams at tournaments. I think this probably was brought up by the Carolina Flyers U20 Academy team or whatever playing at Kickoff this past weekend.
Whose spot did they take? I mean, that would be my question. Did a team apply that wanted to get in and wasn't given a spot?
I bet you so. There's so many teams. The AC is such a dense region. I'm willing to bet there were teams interested in coming.
I wonder why Tennessee got in, Keith. What could that possibly be about?
Don't you can't dig into the conspiracies too much right now.
Is it even a conspiracy? But look,
No,
I mean, you got UNCB in this tournament. You've got the Carolina Flyers Youth Academy. I mean, this is Carolina investing in itself. I don't have a problem with that. Nobody is guaranteed a spot at a tournament just because, they are a college team. Like, if you want to have unsanctioned games in the midst of the tournament, I think that's okay. Did the youth team? I guess they do play everybody in the tournament. So I mean, I don't know. I don't really have a problem with this. Like I guess I'm just wondering, like, who is this really hurting? Like, one team doesn't get in, but if you're not getting into this field, you probably just aren't ready for that yet.
Yeah, but you also get kind of the weirdness around, games that, like, think about it when it's more impactful, right? We've seen Triangle Tourists go to women's division tournaments and, go on deep runs. You're taking away some team's chance to play in a meaningful bracket game. You kind of have this weird game that doesn't count in the middle of your tournament. Like, how do you handle that? Like, I think in general, I would prefer teams not do it. And, we see it as it has historically been done as something to, fill out spots that you otherwise can't fill out. I feel better about that rather than let's add this kind of awkward element to a tournament that, all of our guests have to deal with too. That's my general take. I don't really want to deal with it as a coach. I don't want to have to think about, playing new teams or whatever, but I understand it if teams are trying to fill out their lineups and they don't have enough. So that's my general preference. If there are college teams that want to come play, we should let them play over, other assorted groups.
There's nothing stopping USA Ultimate from saying sanctioned college tournaments are only allowed to have sanctioned the college teams playing in them. And I don't think I'd have a problem. I don't think I have a problem with that.
It does help in some places where they need the extra bodies. Like in this tournament, you don't need it. All right.
And these teams are usually pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, let's look at this team, this Flyers team, this U20 team. They beat the UNCB team and they beat Lehigh and they played 1-point games against Davidson and Tennessee. So I don't know. It's not like they don't belong. They're good enough.
Yeah.
So what's the problem? I get your point that it's the game doesn't count, but it's January. To me, it's a different story if a high school team is playing at Stanford Invite. And maybe there should be some rules around that. Like maybe you're allowed to have B teams and high school teams playing in tournaments before February 15th or something. But there are no rules. So I guess it just doesn't USA Ultimate is not making a stink about it.
Yeah, because US Ultimate's their prerogative is participation. We want as many people to participate. We want as many opportunities as possible, and that's justifiable from their position. But from that standpoint, if I'm US Ultimate, I'm not really looking to make restrictions unless players and teams really want us to.
Yeah, well, interesting. Let us know your thoughts. Deep look at ultiworld.com. For a lot of people, it's, maybe it doesn't affect them in a meaningful way, but do you think it's not the right thing to have teams that are not playing sanctioned games at sanctioned tournaments? That maybe is more of the question even than whether it's college or high school. It's not like the team isn't good enough to compete. It's more that the game doesn't count. And is that a problem? Let us know. Deeplook at ultiworld.com, at DeepLookPod on Twitter. That is going to do it for today's show, but make sure you join us for our subscriber bonus segment Out the Back. Keith, is now on the Connecticut Ultimate board. And we're going to talk about what he's seen from being on the board and us look into a local disc organization that is on the smaller side, that is on the growing side, and thinking about Youth Ultimate and other things. So if you're interested in that, join us for our sub bonus segment with any subscription or a college team pack. Ultiworld.com/subscribe at any tier. For Keith, I'm Charlie saying so long, and we'll talk to you next week. Live for the first time. Well, not the first time, but we're officially beginning our live version of our podcast next Tuesday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time, where we will be doing the show every single week on YouTube. We hope you'll join us in the chat, and really looking forward to making it a live show every single week.